Hey everybody, James again from Plutocracy. Just wanted to do my second House of the Dragon video. I'm going to talk here briefly about the negatives of Season 2, specifically regarding the plot line. I did another video on the absolutely beautiful and interesting story of Daemon Targaryen. Very well written. Now I'm going to do my more negative video. So first of all, the show looks great. That's exactly what you expect from a $500 million, billion-dollar tentpole kind of show. The acting is generally decent, good sets, good blocking, all wonderful. The plot and the storyline, the cohesion, the storyboarding is just a mess. And it's a mess for a few reasons. Before I go into it, I want to do a disclaimer, but saying that this is not just another movie video in the great culture wars that you've seen all over YouTube, where they basically just try to link all of the problems of a modern film or movie to wokeism or anti-wokeism or whatever it is, and wherever you are in the political spectrum, whatever idea or word or phrase that suits you on that particular day. There's way too much of that in the critic community of movies and TV, and that will not happen here. What I will say is that the problem with House of the Dragon has nothing to do with people injecting or shoehorning their ideology into a show. It has nothing to do with Pollyannas. It has nothing to do with the patriarchy or the matriarchy. It just has to do with poor writing and poor story conception. Whenever you have a show like this, you have to give the audience a so what. Why do we care? Why are we watching? Why do we care about these characters? Why do we care about Rhaenyra? Why do we care about Aegon? Why do we care about Alicent Hightower? Why do we care about Christian Cole? Why? Now, in Game of Thrones, right, they immediately, because it's based on a wonderful book, they immediately give the viewer a so what. And it's two so whats, actually. It's the first so what is that there's this ominous demonic force north of the wall. The others, the White Walkers, that are coming for everybody. Okay, so that's so what. The second so what is that the Lannisters are coming. They quickly and accurately portrayed the Lannisters as the villains. They're a terrible group of people. They're out for blood. They're out for their own self-interest. And so they give us very soon what the so what is. And then in addition to the so what, they also give us something to hope for, which is they give you these interesting, wonderful characters like Arya Stark, like Jon Snow, that Ned Stark, and many, many more that you root for. That you're like, okay, well, I want to see these people succeed. I want to see them, get to the end of the adventure. And they just don't do that in House of the Dragons. The first season of House of Dragons was decently enough written. It was just extremely boring. It's so what was who's going to succeed to the throne. So they gave that to you very quickly. It's a pretty, it's a pretty lame, honestly, so what, but it does exist. Season 2, they don't have a so what. And what I mean by that is that the entire plot revolves around this civil war between the Greens and the Blacks. And so, all right, so it's a civil war. So in civil wars, there's a good side and a bad side, maybe, right? They don't paint that. They don't give that to us. Why do we care that the Greens win? Why do we care that the Blacks win? Why is either faction any different than the other? Why is either faction anything more than just a collection of spoiled, out-of-touch aristocrats who are willing to sacrifice the entire population in order to foster their own rather archaic ideas of leadership? We don't get that. We get a lot of dialogue. We get a lot of back and forth. Rhaenyra is kind of painted as the hero. She's certainly the main character, but she doesn't really do anything to make the viewer feel like she's more deserving of Aemon or Aegon or Alicent Hightower overruling. Rhaenyra essentially just hangs out on Dragonstone the entire season and, makes relatively poor decisions. There's no reason to root for her. There's no reason to root against her. There's no reason to root for or against the Greens either. They're basically just two warring houses that are fighting it out. Now that could be a plot, right? We're going to parody the folly of the aristocracy, of the nobility that is willing to destroy the entire country in order to foster their own, self-interest. That could be a wonderful plot. That is the plot of many Shakespeare plays, as well as Christopher Marlowe plays, is to parody the aristocracy. And we just don't see that at all. There's not enough of the trials of the small folk. I mean, you get this great little interlude with Hugh Hammer and his family and a few other small folk around the country, but that's it. Everything else is from the perspective of the nobility. So the viewer can't conceptualize that, hey, like these are just both, there are no heroes, right, in this Civil War. They're all just villains. And they're all just doing this at the expense of the small folk who are just kind of surviving. That's the number one problem with season 2 of House of the Dragon. That's why a lot of people don't like it, because there's no reason to continue watching the episodes. It's like, the Greens take territory, the Blacks take territory. It's like, so what? Let them fight it out. Who cares? If that continues in later seasons, this is going to be a pretty epic plot bust if they don't find a way of giving us a reason to watch and to root for one side or the other, or to parody one side or the other. Cool graphics can only take you so far. Or, I mean, apparently they can take you, as far as you want now. You still get a terrible product. That's the main reason. There are a couple other reasons I wanted to discuss. One reason is there's not enough layers in the characters. Game of Thrones, especially the early seasons, was so brilliant because you had such layered characters. The Hound is my all-time favorite. He's this brutal, kind of stoic, brooding warrior, but he's, a bit of a road philosopher. He's a bit of a coward. He has this intense desire to protect younger women that are in trouble. He's, a mercenary. I mean, he's a lot of different things, right? Same thing with like Sansa. Sansa's stuck up. Sansa's hoity-toity. She's out of touch, but she also has this, smaller, humble side that is just trying to survive and trying to make sense of this big world that she's in. You just don't see that in the House of the Dragon characters. Someone like Sir Criston Cole is basically just shown as a meathead who's hooking up with the queen, and that's it. He doesn't have layers. Another character would be either of the Green leaders, Aemon or Aegon, right? There's a good scene. There's a couple of good scenes where Aegon goes into a bar and he's interacting with the small folk, and he's shown as just kind of like this party guy, but that's it. Otherwise, he's just shown as this kind of leader, this ruthless leader. Same thing with Aemon. He's just this guy with one eye that just wants to burn people. There's not layers to those characters, which is why they're disinteresting. And when you don't get interested in the characters, you don't get interested in the story. It's interesting that, especially in the day that we live in, we really want to maintain this old school architecture of story where the bad guy is the bad guy, the good guy is the good guy, and there's no layers to any of them, right? The good guy is the good guy, the bad guy is the bad guy. I mean, we're not any much better than Stagecoach, right? Where John Wayne is the good guy and the bandits are the bad guys. The characters need more layers. They need more screen time, which would mean following fewer characters, which I think is fine. The final issue is the camera, the perspective, the characters. They just fly around the world too quickly. And what I mean by that is they're bouncing around from all parts of the country, and you just get kind of bewildered trying to follow these story arcs. And I know they based it on the way that Game of Thrones did it, but there's just too much going on that's trivial. And so most of the episodes are essentially just dialogue between people about what they're going to do, not them doing it, just what they're going to do or should have done or what they did or what someone else did. It's just long dialogue scenes. There's no action. They're not, getting on the King's Road and trying to make it to the wall. They're not trying to cross the wall. They're not trying to cross the. They're just sitting around in essentially court life talking. This was the quintessential problem of the first season, why it was so boring. I fell asleep in almost every episode. Because the first season is essentially just a bunch of people, a bunch of courtiers talking about being in court, how to be in court, that their dad was in court, that their mom was in court, that their kids are going to be in court, who's going to succeed. But they don't do anything. They just sit around and talk. There's no action at all. And you can definitely pull off a show with just dialogue. I mean, there have been some great shows that are just a lot of snappy dialogue, but this dialogue has to be interesting. It has to be introspective, has to be philosophical. You have to have, those wonderful Tyrion Lannister lines where he's up in Winterfell and Theon is just like, oh, it must have been a beautiful sight to see the Lannister fleet burn, and he turns around to him. Tyrion turns around and says, there's nothing more beautiful than men burning alive, right? That kind of deeper, more spirited, layered dialogue that gets the viewers thinking about the forms of this world, about what we are as human beings, about whether or not human beings are hopelessly flawed and hopelessly broken creatures, or if there is actually some dignity to us. That's good dialogue. Would be my argument. That's the purpose of actually drama, is to bring up those questions and to answer those questions, or to kind of answer them, or answer them in different ways. It's, to me, the point is to get people to think and to increase their brain cavity, right? And you just don't see any of that. Again, the conversations in season 2 of House of the Dragon are just pretty pedantic. It's just talking about supplies and raising armies and random feuds between different noble houses that no one has any reference for and means nothing to the viewer. It's talking about ancestors and current people that, again, unless you are like a scholar in the history of the Game of Thrones universe, you have no idea what they're talking about. And it pretty much killed the season, the combination of those three things. And it's a shame. I mean, you have hundreds of millions of dollars. You can hire some writers. You can hire a storyboard person to come in and think about, like, hey, like, there has to be a so what? Why do we care? So what? The Greens win, the Blacks win. What? What's going on? Why do we care about these characters? There was really very few of those moments. There was a brilliant one in the later episodes where the Queen Helena, who's in grief because her son was murdered, is asked to basically fly in her dragon and join the war effort, and she basically just kind of very meekly but very strongly says, I don't want to burn anybody, I'm not going to. Again, like, that's dialogue. That's that thinking dialogue that it gets you interested in the scenes, and there's just not enough of it. There's not enough so what, right? The characters move around too much. Hopefully they reconcile this. I highly doubt they won't. They'll probably get caught in the fog of the internet sphere, which is, focusing on wokeism and anti-wokeism, and there's too many female characters, and there's not enough female characters, and it's, the show's controlled by the patriarchy, or it's controlled by the matriarchy, or it's not controlled by the patriarchy enough, or it's not controlled by the matriarchy enough. Basically, these mind-numbing, overly done, tread on tropes that people throw out there to further the culture wars, mainly just to make money, to be honest, but also because there is still a strong faction of people that believe in this, that believe that, if you have a strong female Rhaenyra Targaryen, that somehow that's eroding the traditional family in America, which is ludicrous, or just because you accurately represent primogeniture and the inheritance rights of men in medieval kingdoms, that somehow you are advancing the the patriarchy and patriarchal values. I'm going to do a separate video on that. It's ludicrous. The problem with the show is nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with story structure and character dialogue. Thanks, guys.